For those who played or have been playing the game for a while, chances are you've likely heard the term 1v9 used before, a humorous colloquial expression used by players to describe a situation where one player attempts to carry the game against the enemy team in spite of their own team's perceived ineffectiveness, essentially implying that you're not only facing off against the enemy team alone, but you're also doing so with the weight of your own team dragging you down. This is obviously an exaggeration, but perhaps as a result of it being thrown around so much, said term has been closely associated with a number of champions for their ability to exert so much pressure on the game they can actually achieve victory in such a scenario. The Skirmisher subclass is notoriously home to some of the most dangerous champions in the game, and despite every class possessing champions with the potential to 1v9 games, Zed and Katarina for assassins, Karthus for mages, Irelia and Camille for divers, Alawi, Aatrox and Darius for juggernauts, the Skirmisher class may have arguably the highest quantity of them, likely because the hallmarks of the subclass naturally lean towards that kind of mentality. In today's video, we'll be analyzing Skirmishers in League of Legends. What about them gives them the strength to 1v9 games as often as they do? Having discussed the Slayer class in great detail in the past along with countless pieces on individual members of the Skirmisher class, this video may come off a little redundant, but I think it's important to discuss them holistically as I feel like depending on who you ask, they can honestly resemble any of the DPS classes in the game, along with possessing the highest proclivity for split pushing, conducive to what makes them such a threatening class. Skirmishers, also known as duelists, are characterized by their incredible sustained DPS, rivaling or potentially exceeding that of marksmen. Though melee in nature, they can be surprisingly difficult to shake off as they not only have mobility in their kit, but readily available mobility at that. By comparison, the Diver subclass is also known for their impeccable engage potential, having gap closes with ranges far enough to where if they're present on your screen you have to account for the very real possibility of getting engaged on. In exchange for the long-reaching threat bubble, however, Divers are typically one and done. Once they get on you, it can be difficult for them to re-engage if you make attempts to either push them away or fall back, though typically they also come with a modicum of lockdown to prevent you from doing so, like Vi's ultimate, J4's Cataclysm, or Camille's ultimatum. Meanwhile, Skirmishers don't have quite the same gap closing distance, but they make up for it by staying on top of you once they do get in, identical to their sister class, the Assassins. Unlike their stealthy counterparts, Skirmishers prefer to face you head-on, true to their alternate moniker of Duelist. Their extreme sustained damage output is further complemented by having slightly more bulk than your conventional glass cannons, both from within their own repertoires and also from having the freedom to build items that supplement their durability if necessitated. So in essence, you can think of Skirmishers as the midpoint between Diver and Assassin. They have the same rushdown capability that Assassins do, while also being ever so slightly harder to kill in a similar fashion to Divers. Their most notable aspect would definitely have to be their damage output. Like marksmen, so long as their health bar is non-zero, Skirmishers can always contribute meaningful pressure in a fight, typically making them high priority targets. Not just that, but the DPS is often tailored to break through most if not all forms of defense, which is one advantage they have over AD carries to make up for their lack of range. Going through each individual Skirmisher will paint a clearer picture of the kind of shredding capability they have. Velvet is all about a fast rate of attack and continuous ramping true damage. Fiora has % max out true damage, self-explanatory. Gwen has % health and true damage, but thankfully separate. Jax has attack speed out the ass and a modicum of % health damage courtesy of the changes to Counter-Strike. Cassandra has max health damage that can convert to max out true damage when using his ultimate. Red Kayn acquires max health on both his Q and ultimate. Klett's W and ultimate both deal % health. Lilia has both % health and true damage, kind of like Gwen. Master Yi, true damage and on-hit effects. Neela, one of the few skirmishers with AoE pressure, and though she doesn't have any % health or true damage in her kit, she does have % armor penetration from built-in crit chance, so you can think of it as partial true damage. Neither Riven nor Sylas contain % health or on-hit elements in their kit, but they are among the most ability spamming champs in the game, enabling them to weave in equal parts auto attack and ability DPS at the same time. Not to mention having a decent amount of AoE coverage, especially if the latter steals a teamfight ultimate. Tryndamere typically builds crit, giving him the same sustained DPS as an AD carry for all intents and purposes. Viego's Q and ultimate deal % health damage, and he's known to build on him as well. Finally, the two win ships, Yasuo and Yone. Need I say more? Members of the Skirmisher class are legendary for their sustained output. Their kits are designed in such a way that fighting them in single combat is next to suicidal unless you yourself are also playing a Skirmisher. It's here we can pinpoint the key reason behind their infamy for 1v9ing games. It's hard to respond to their pressure depending on how they exert it. I brought this up before in past videos and I think it's very appropriate for this topic as well. In a given match, you have 5 champions pitted against 5 champions. Each player opens up with 20%, representing the amount of influence they have on the game. Scoring advantages through kills, gold from CSing, levels, objectives and whatnot subtracts pressure from the opposing champion and adds it to yours. For example, if you solo kill your lane opponent, they drop from 20% to 18% while you go up to 22%. Going off this, in theory, every member of your team should be able to match the corresponding member of the enemy team. In practice, it's not always an even 20 versus another 20, and no class embodies this more than Skirmishers. Like I said before, By nature, they specialize in single combat, being able to deal with all manner of classes, whether tanks, juggernauts, divers, mages, marksmen, or even their assassin counterparts. When it comes to one-on-one, they are without question the most difficult champions to fight, especially if they have even a sliver of advantage against you. And the reason for that is their central weakness can't be tapped into by yourself, literally. In light of the absence of their front-loaded pressure, at least in relation to other classes like burst mages or assassins, skirmishers take time to kill their opponent, giving said opponent a window of opportunity to react and respond, small as it may be. That's why on the wiki they say the main vulnerabilities of skirmishers are target selection and being focused. Traditional answers to enemy pressure such as durability or disengage don't work against a skirmisher as we've gone over, so the only way to deal with them is through circumstance. Skirmishers are duelists. They thrive in 1v1 scenarios, but what if it's a 1v2? While several of its members do have AoE damage in their kit, the majority of their skills can only ever be concentrated on one person at a time, requiring them to commit to killing one person before moving on to the other. So combining their need to go after one target at a time with the slightly longer time it takes for them to kill said target compared to an assassin or diver, skirmishers are more prone to getting monkey in the middle or beaten out through numbers advantage. To be fair, a 2v1 will almost always result in the one losing, that's basic math, but members of other classes tend to do better against multiple enemies. For instance, battle mages couldn't care less if they're staying down one opponent or 5. In fact, they prefer to so they can take full advantage of their AoE abilities. Therefore, it's in the skirmisher's best interest to put themselves in positions that lower the chance of a full-on confrontation against 2 or more enemies. The environment of solo queue is inherently discordant and chaotic. Encountering a team with all 5 players acting in perfect sync with their voice comms is few and far between. Therefore, the rule of thumb is every man for himself, and from a macro sense that can work to the skirmisher's benefit. Lack of communication makes it difficult for teams to allocate resources efficiently, causing them to either underinvest or overinvest in decisions from both a macro and micro perspective. Macro mechanically, we have split pushing. Given their overwhelming sidelane presence, skirmishers have incredible split pushing. With most of them being auto-attack oriented, skirmishers can take towers in record time, especially with the help of void grubs, not just any one person who tries to match them in side lane, and to top it all off, they have the mobility to make a quick escape in the event they suspect the enemy team is sending more people after them, which I think is one advantage they have that Juggernaut split pushers do not. Nasus, Yorick, and Trundle might have incredible split pushing and dueling power, but it's riskier for them to walk up really far since they have to commit more than a Fiora or a Tryndamere who can get out as quickly as they get in. This creates a touch and go situation for the enemy team. Provided the skirmisher isn't like 0 and 5, you can't send only one person to deal with them unless that one person also happens to be a skirmisher. Hypothetically, if you were to send a Darius or Shen to stop a Riven, Silas, or Jax, the best they can do is stall for time. Typically though, tanks, fighters, and mages are best when they're with their team, and so delegating them to handle side lane is not the most productive use of their time, whereas the best place for a skirmisher to be is away from all the action since they don't usually perform that well in team fights with a few exceptions. So for them to break out of this, they have to stop the split pusher first, but in order to do so, they have to allocate more manpower, making it easy for your team to capitalize on the 4v3, or better yet 4v2 to take whatever objective is on the other side of the map. Conversely, if the enemy team tries to 5v4 your team to get the objective, that gives you an opportunity to punish them for leaving you alone by tearing open their inhibs, which can lead to a potential backdoor opportunity later down the road. It's a lose-lose situation where they either underinvest by not sending enough people to stop the bleeding, or overinvest by sending too many people at the expense of losing control of the other side of the map. Micromechanically, while skirmishers don't exactly enjoy teamfights, they're not necessarily ineffective. Besides, in solo queue, most 5v5s can hardly be classified as teamfights. You hear this all the time. Your topper jungler complaining, "Where's my team?" when said team was being zoned away by the enemy king going for a flank now that your frontline's preoccupied. With a million things happening all at once, most teamfights boil down to attacking whoever is in front of you, with many players tunnel visioning and losing track of their surroundings. Skirmishers can take advantage of this by masquerading as an assassin. Say a fight breaks out in Dragon Pit. If everyone begins to scatter from the fight, that's the perfect opportunity for the Master Yi, Viego, Bel'Veth, or Fiora to pick off low health stragglers and begin their rampage. So long as they can focus all their attention on one person, even for just a couple seconds, that's enough time for them to kill that person before moving on to another, then another, then another. In fact, that's one reason why Cassante dominates pro play. His ultimate literally isolates a member of the enemy team for you while simultaneously transforming him into a walking chainsaw to hack them to pieces. In any case, teams might underinvest attention on the skirmisher and make the fatal mistake of spreading apart, creating a chance for the skirmisher to engage in single combat, if even for a little bit. The inverse can also happen too. With how threatening skirmishers are, especially those with any kind of snowball mechanic like the aforementioned Bel'Veth or Master Yi, players might overreact to seeing them flank your backline and spam all resources to escape. Perfectly understandable, mind you. I'd pee my pants too if I was a squishy mage or marksman being dove on by a Riven, Yone, or Tryndamere. If they burn all their ultimates and sums on the Skirmisher, that's resources they don't have for the remainder of the fight. So in this case, enemy teams might overinvest and exhaust most of their resources trying to stop the Skirmisher. Further accentuating what makes them so good at 1v9ing is that in addition to everything I said so far, they're just naturally very independent champions, perfect for solo queue. Because they typically have their own agenda, Skirmishers couldn't care less about who is on their team, hence the term 1v9. They can carry in spite of their team if their hand is forced. Granted, it never hurts to have a proper team. If you have a squad that can handle a 4v5 comfortably, that gives you plenty of time to split push and threaten a backdoor. If they have a ton of lockdown, then that gives you an opening to pick out the first target. But worst case scenario, Fiora, Gwen, Riven, Yone, Sylas, Tryndamere, they don't give a flying f**k who is on their team or the enemies. Okay, maybe Sylas cares about who's on the enemy team, but you get the idea. Even for a champion like Yasuo, having a Diana, Rel, or Malphite's a wet dream for the guy, but when push comes to shove, he can set up his own knockouts. Furthermore, Skirmishers are among the best scalers in the game. Thanks to their extreme DPS, all of them get stronger the longer the game goes on for. Velvet gets more true damage and attack speed, Mastery can 3-shot everyone. Neela shits out damage more than any other marksman in the game. Tryndamere 2-taps you, Cassandre becomes invincible, Jax enters evasion for 2 seconds every 2 seconds. These guys outclass virtually all other champions when it comes to sheer late game strength. Even ability casters like Riven, Lilia, Kayn, and Sylas get stronger too. Not only does Riven do more damage, but she can spam her abilities faster, and with all the skills being AoE, her pressure can be multiplied 5 times over. Plus, building offense increases her damage and durability courtesy of Valor. Lily is an ability caster, but she does percent max health damage and gets faster with her Q stacks. If you're going Red King, percent health damage and drain tanking make him one of the best fighters in the game, and towards the late game, all damage on Blue King gets multiplied by almost 1.5 times by virtue of his passive. Sylas gets more mobility on account of 2 of his abilities being dashes. He gets more healing as a result of cooldown reduction and can get more uses of other people's ultimates, not to mention, the bastard has absurd AP ratios. Skirmishers are just built to scale. The expected trade-off should be that they have a weak early game, right? And in fairness, some of them do, but most of them really don't. Many Skirmishers have tolerable, if not strong early games, which only makes their late game all the more frustrating. It would be one thing if you could treat them like Nasus and Kayle and bully them all the live long day, but last I checked, most of them actually have strong level 3s, and especially level 6. Putting it all together, Skirmishers are the solo queue champions. They're exceptionally good at taking matters into their own hands and finding ways to exert pressure on the enemy team, no matter how far behind their team might be. They can easily switch gears between looking for attack angles with their team, or going full mute all and split pushing all the way to the enemy nexus, or die trying. Looking at the top players in Challenger, you'll find no shortage of Skirmishers. Sylas, Riven, Viego, Yone, Fiora, Jax, Gwen, that one random Kled 1 trick, I think his name's Captain Bear. There's so many because of all the classes in the game, they have the highest personal agency, and in an environment where the sentiment of everyone on my team is room temperature IQ except for me runs rampant, you might as well play someone who can ignore everything that's happening around you and unironically just 1v9 the game. I swear, as a top laner, fighting a Skirmisher has to be the most stressful thing in the game. You have to play perfectly in lane so as not to give them a single lead, and then in the mid to late game you're torn between dealing with their constant split pushing and trying to help your team. Although I suppose I'm not one to talk, I used to be a Fiora main back in the day. Anyways, what are your thoughts on the Skirmisher class? Do you think there's anything I forgot to mention? I welcome you to share it in the comments. For now, if you enjoyed the video, it would be great if you left a like and subscribed. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter @Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other class discussion videos if you haven't yet. Until next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.